You know that feeling when the alarm goes off, and for a few seconds, you genuinely can't understand why the world expects you to be awake right now? Not just tired, not lazy, almost disoriented. Your eyes open, but your mind feels far away. The room feels colder than it should. The simplest task, sitting up, checking your phone, turning on the light, somehow feels emotionally expensive. And meanwhile, other people seem strangely functional. There are people who wake up at 6 in the morning and immediately start talking, making coffee, replying to messages, going for runs, existing like their brain already signed the consent form hours ago. But for some people, mornings feel less like a beginning and more like an interruption. What's strange is how quickly this gets interpreted as a personality flaw. If you struggle in the morning, people often attach meaning to it. They call you unmotivated, undisciplined, bad at routines, irresponsible with sleep, as if your brain waking differently automatically says something about your character. But a lot of the time, it doesn't. Because the truth is, there's more going on here than people realize. Most explanations about morning people versus night people stay painfully surface level. They turn it into productivity advice or self-help culture. But underneath all of that, your relationship with mornings is often connected to biology, psychology, emotional conditioning, and the way your nervous system learned to interact with the world. Your brain is not simply refusing to wake up. Sometimes it's refusing to enter a state it unconsciously associates with stress. Researchers studying circadian rhythms, the internal clock that regulates sleep and alertness, have found that people naturally differ in when their brains reach peak cognitive performance. Some nervous systems become alert earlier. Others become alert later. This isn't imagination. It's measurable. But neuroscience adds another layer most people never talk about. When you wake up, your brain goes through something called sleep inertia. For some people, it lasts a few minutes. For others, especially people under chronic stress, irregular sleep, anxiety, burnout, or emotional exhaustion, it can linger much longer. During this period, parts of the brain responsible for decision-making, emotional regulation, and motivation are still partially offline, which explains why mornings can feel emotionally heavier than logic says they should. You're technically awake, but your brain hasn't fully transitioned yet. And if your nervous system already spends most of its time anticipating pressure, obligations, unpredictability, or emotional fatigue, waking up can unconsciously feel like returning to battle. That's why some people don't wake up feeling refreshed. They wake up bracing. What's even more interesting is how early this pattern can begin. For some people, mornings were never calm to begin with. Maybe mornings in your childhood felt rushed, loud, stressful. Maybe waking up meant school anxiety, criticism, conflict, pressure, or emotional unpredictability. Maybe your body quietly learned that mornings were the moment safety ended and performance began. The nervous system remembers patterns long after the conscious mind stops thinking about them. So years later, adulthood arrives, and suddenly you think you hate mornings, when in reality, your body may simply associate mornings with activation, vigilance, and demand. Not because you're weak, because your brain adapted. And adaptation is rarely logical in the moment it forms. It's protective. There's also another piece people overlook. Many individuals who feel mentally alive late at night are not necessarily bad sleepers. Sometimes nighttime is simply the first moment their nervous system finally stops monitoring the world. At night, expectations disappear. No emails, no immediate demands, no pressure to respond correctly. The world softens. The brain relaxes its guard. And suddenly thoughts become clearer. Creativity returns. Emotions become accessible again. For some people, midnight feels more emotionally safe than morning ever has, which means the problem isn't always sleep itself. Sometimes it's psychological permission. And none of this means mornings are bad. It also doesn't mean night-oriented people are somehow deeper, smarter, or more creative. Different nervous systems simply organize energy differently. One pattern isn't morally superior to another. Some people genuinely feel regulated by structure, sunlight, early activity, and predictable starts to the day. Others need gradual entry into consciousness, more silence, more transition time, more emotional buffering between sleep and performance. Neither is wrong, but society tends to reward one version more visibly. That's why people internalize shame around the other. And shame changes the experience even more, because eventually the struggle stops being just physical tiredness. It becomes identity. You wake up already feeling behind, already feeling guilty, already comparing yourself to an imaginary person who effortlessly drinks cold water at 5 a.m. and journals while the sunrise hits their expensive curtains. Meanwhile, your brain is still trying to understand why consciousness resumed at all. But here's the paradox most people miss. The same brain that struggles heavily with abrupt activation is often deeply sensitive to emotional and environmental nuance. People who need longer to arrive mentally are sometimes highly perceptive internally. Their nervous systems process more context, more emotion, more stimulation. That depth can create exhaustion, but also insight. The brain that resists harsh transitions is often the same brain that notices subtleties others miss. There's a quiet trade-off there. And unfortunately, modern life tends to reward immediate output more than internal processing. So people start fighting themselves instead of understanding themselves. They build entire identities around forcing their nervous system into shapes it was never naturally designed to hold for long. And eventually, exhaustion starts sounding like failure, when really, it may just be mismatch. Not every brain enters the day the same way. Not every nervous system responds to pressure identically. Not every form of resistance is laziness. Sometimes your brain hesitates in the morning because somewhere along the way, waking up stopped feeling neutral. It became associated with performance, alertness, responsibility, emotional labor, survival. And once the nervous system learns that pattern, it doesn't disappear just because someone online says to fix your mindset. Your brain isn't a machine refusing commands. It's an organism trying to protect energy the best way it knows how. Which is why understanding yourself usually works better than fighting yourself. Because once you stop interpreting every struggle as a character flaw, something strange happens. You begin noticing that your experience actually makes sense, not perfectly, not completely, but enough to remove some of the unnecessary shame attached to it. And maybe that's the part people need most. Not another optimization routine, not another productivity system. Just the realization that the way their mind responds to the world has a history behind it, a logic behind it, a nervous system behind it. You are not broken for finding mornings hard. Your brain may simply be carrying patterns that were never properly explained to you. And when you finally understand the pattern, the experience starts feeling less like personal failure and more like something human. Because sometimes the goal isn't becoming a different person. Sometimes it's learning why you became this one. And once you start seeing that clearly, you begin noticing other things too. The habits you thought were random, the emotional reactions that seem to appear from nowhere, the strange ways your mind tries to keep you safe without asking permission first. If this felt familiar, there's probably more of yourself you've been misinterpreting for a very long time.